I didn't even notice the cold rain soaking through my blouse until it clung to my skin like a second layer. The street lights blurred in the downpour, casting long reflections on the wet pavement as I walked faster, trying to outrun the memory of that dinner table. My hair was plastered to my face, my shoes squeaked with every step, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away. Only hours ago, I believed I was about to start a new chapter of my life. Tyler Grant, the man I had been dating for nearly a year, had invited me to dinner with his parents. He said it with that easy smile of his, the one that always melted my doubts. "It's time you meet them, Nat. You're important to me." Those words had echoed in my head as I stood in front of the mirror earlier that evening, carefully choosing my outfit and telling myself that maybe this was it, maybe he was planning to propose soon. But nothing prepared me for what I walked into. The Grants were wealthy in a way I had only seen in magazines. Their house wasn't just big, it looked like something out of an architectural digest. The dinner table was long enough to seat 20, even though only 4 of us sat there. And from the moment I said hello, I felt like I had stepped into a world I didn't belong to. His mother's eyes swept over me like a scanner, calculating and cold. His father's handshake was firm, polite, but there was no warmth behind it. I tried to smile, tried to breathe, tried to ignore the tightening knot in my stomach as they began asking questions. Not the kind meant to get to know me, but the kind meant to measure me. Where did I go to school? Why just a vocational college and not a university? Wasn't tailoring a bit limiting as a career? Did my family own property, or did we rent? Each answer seemed to lower their already shallow impression of me. And Tyler, he just sat there, shifting uncomfortably but never speaking up. Not once did he say, "She's amazing and I love her," or even, "Mom, Dad, that's enough." He kept his eyes down as if embarrassed. I left before dessert. I couldn't sit there another second, pretending I wasn't breaking inside. I had hoped, stupidly, maybe, that Tyler would follow me, that he would take my hand and say he didn't care what they thought. But he didn't. I walked out alone into the storm, and he stayed behind. Now here I was, trudging through the rain, clutching my purse to my chest as if it could hold my dignity together. I thought about heading straight home, but I couldn't, not yet. My mom, Susan, has a heart condition. Stress is dangerous for her, and she's always been sensitive to my moods. I couldn't just walk in crying, couldn't let her see the humiliation written all over my face. She's been through enough already. She doesn't need to carry my heartbreak too. So I kept walking until I saw the warm lights of a small, 24-hour coffee shop on the corner. I ducked inside, shaking water from my hair and wiping at my face, pretending it was only rain that streaked my cheeks. The smell of roasted coffee beans wrapped around me like a blanket, and for a moment I let myself breathe. But then it hit me. This wasn't just about Tyler or his parents. This was about me. About every time I'd told myself I wasn't good enough because I didn't have a fancy degree or a trust fund. About every late night I'd spent at the sewing machine, building a dream so small I thought it barely counted. And about how I'd pinned so much hope on someone who, when it really mattered, stayed silent. I curled my hands around a steaming cup of coffee and stared out at the rain. It blurred everything, cars, lights, people rushing by, but it couldn't blur the truth I was finally beginning to see. This wasn't the end of my story. Maybe it was just the brutal, messy beginning of something I hadn't yet imagined. When I was a little girl, it was just me and Mom. No brothers, no sisters, no dad waiting at the door when we came home. My father had left before I could even form a memory of him, and Mom never spoke ill of him. She just said some people aren't ready to love the way a family needs. That was all I needed to know. We lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of Des Moines, Iowa. It wasn't much, but it was ours, or rather, it was rented and decorated with love, which sometimes feels like the same thing. Mom worked as an administrative assistant at a small insurance firm, always juggling paperwork and phone calls with a calm smile on her face. Even on days when I could see how tired she was, she would come home, hang up her coat and ask, So, Nat, what did you dream about today? Her heart condition wasn't something I understood as a child. I just knew she would get winded climbing stairs or have to sit down when her chest tightened. As I grew older, I realized how fragile she really was and how strong at the same time. Doctors had told her years ago not to risk pregnancy because of her weak heart, but she decided life without me wasn't worth living. She always said, "I wanted you, Natalie. You were my dream before you were even born." Because of her health, I learned early on to be independent. While other kids were out riding bikes until dark, I was learning to cook simple dinners or folding laundry so Mom wouldn't have to push herself. It never felt like a burden. She had given me everything she could, and helping her back felt natural. What Mom gave me most, though, was creativity. She was the one who taught me to sew when I was 9. She had an old Singer sewing machine, loud and stubborn, that clanked and squeaked but still turned fabric into something beautiful. I remember sitting at that machine, my feet barely reaching the pedal, sewing crooked lines on scraps of old fabric while Mom clapped like I'd just finished a runway show. She would always say, "Your hands are gentle, Nat, and that means you'll make something beautiful out of this world." By the time I hit high school, I knew I wanted to design and make clothes. Not big fashion lines or glossy magazines, just simple, elegant dresses that made real women feel special. I didn't have the money or the grades for a fancy design school, but I enrolled in a vocational program right after graduation. People sometimes looked at me funny when I said I was going to be a seamstress, like it wasn't ambitious enough. But Mom's eyes would light up every time she saw me working, and that was enough. We didn't have much money, and I'll admit, sometimes it was hard. There were Christmases when the gifts were handmade and birthdays when dinner was just spaghetti and bread. But we laughed a lot. We made jokes about our squeaky old couch, painted the kitchen cabinets ourselves one summer, and turned the living room into a makeshift runway when I finished my first real dress. Still, there were nights when I could hear Mom crying softly in her room, trying to be quiet so I wouldn't notice. I knew she worried about the future, about what would happen if her heart got worse, about how I'd take care of myself if something happened to her. And even though I was young, I promised myself I'd find a way to make life better for us. That promise is why I worked so hard, why I took extra shifts at the alteration shop, why I rarely went out. Meeting Tyler felt like the universe rewarding me for all of that effort. He made me feel seen, like someone finally understood that I wasn't just some girl with a sewing machine. And maybe that's why his silence at dinner hurt so much, because it shattered not just the idea of him, but the idea that all my hard work had finally brought me to someone who valued me. Mom didn't know any of this yet. She only knew I'd gone out to meet someone important and hadn't come home with the glow she expected. She was waiting, fragile and hopeful, completely unaware that her daughter's heart had just been cracked open. But I wasn't ready to tell her not yet. She had enough on her plate, and soon I'd find out she had more to face than either of us realized. I still remember the first time I met Tyler Grant like it was yesterday. It was at a small fundraising dance my friend Lily had begged me to attend. I almost didn't go. I was tired from working a double shift at the alteration shop, and I didn't own anything that felt worthy of a fundraiser. But Lily insisted, and I gave in, pulling out a simple navy dress I'd made myself months earlier. The venue was beautiful, string lights wrapped around pillars, soft jazz floating through the air, people mingling in suits and dresses that cost more than my monthly rent. I felt out of place the moment I walked in, clinging to a plastic cup of punch like it was my shield. And then Tyler walked over. He wasn't like the others, not at first glance. He didn't flash that arrogant smirk I'd seen on some of the guys there. Instead, he had this warm, confident smile, like he actually wanted to talk to me. His dark hair was neatly styled, his suit obviously custom, but there was something easy about him. "Is this your first time at one of these?" he asked, leaning slightly so I could hear him over the music. I nodded, smiling nervously. "Is it that obvious?" He grinned. "A little, but that's not a bad thing." Sometimes the people who don't belong at these things are the most interesting ones here. I laughed, feeling an unexpected spark. We talked for what felt like hours that night about my job, his studies at a business school, our favorite places to eat in the city. He didn't seem fazed when I said I was a seamstress. In fact, he looked impressed. You actually make clothes? That's amazing. I can barely sew a button back on. From that night, things moved quickly. He called the next day, took me out for coffee, then dinner, then movies. Tyler had this energy about him. Like life was a game he'd already figured out how to win. He came from money. That was clear, but he never rubbed it in my face. He drove a nice car, wore watches worth more than my entire wardrobe, but he still laughed at my thrift store jokes and claimed he liked my home-cooked meals better than anything fancy. For months, I let myself believe I'd found someone who saw me, really saw me. Someone who didn't care that I didn't have a degree from some big-name university or a family name worth dropping at cocktail parties. But there were small signs I ignored, like how he never really invited me to his family's gatherings, or how he changed the subject when I asked about his parents. They're private, he'd say. You'll meet them eventually. And I held on to that eventually like it was a promise. I imagined meeting them and proving I was worthy, that I wasn't just some girl with a sewing machine, but someone who could build a future with their son. Tyler seemed to like my independence, at least on the surface. He'd watch me work late at the shop, sometimes stopping by to bring me coffee, saying, "You're the hardest working person I know." Those moments felt real. He even talked about travel plans, New York for the holidays, maybe a road trip next summer. I thought he was serious about us. Looking back, I wonder if he ever was. Because when he finally said, "It's time you meet my parents," I thought it meant he was ready to take the next step. But maybe it was just a box he needed to check off. One more thing to make his life look complete. I told Mom the night before the dinner. She smiled so big it nearly brought tears to my eyes. "See, I told you good things happen to good people, Nat," she said, touching my cheek softly. I didn't tell her how nervous I was about impressing his parents, about not being enough. The truth was I was terrified, but I wanted to believe in Tyler, in us. That's why I said yes. Why I put on that soft peach blouse I'd sewn myself. Why I rehearsed polite conversation in my head on the way there. I had no idea how much that one night would change everything. When Tyler told me his parents wanted to meet me, my first reaction was excitement, quickly followed by panic. "Friday night at our family place," he said casually, like it was no big deal. "Just dinner, Nat. They'll love you." I smiled and nodded, but inside I felt the weight of it settle like a stone in my stomach. His parents owned multiple businesses across Iowa. Auto dealerships, real estate investments, even a stake in some tech company. They weren't just comfortable. They were the kind of wealthy that made headlines when they donated to charities. And me? I was just a girl who fixed wedding dresses and hemmed pants for people who couldn't afford to buy new ones. Still, I tried to look on the bright side. Maybe they'd see how hard I worked, how independent I was. Maybe they'd see I cared for Tyler for who he was, not for what he had. Friday came with a steady drizzle that refused to stop all afternoon. I wore a soft blue dress I'd made from a discounted fabric bolt months earlier, simple yet elegant, paired with modest heels. I couldn't afford a taxi and Tyler had been tied up at work, so I decided to take the bus across town. That's when I saw her. The bus was nearly empty, but at the front, a frail woman in a tan coat and knitted hat stood, clutching an old fabric bag. She was arguing quietly with the driver, her voice trembling. "I just need to get to the hospital. My grandson's there. I'll pay you back tomorrow, I swear." The driver shook his head. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but I can't let you ride without fare." People looked away, pretending not to hear, but I couldn't. Something about the way she stood there, trying so hard to maintain her dignity, even as tears welled in her eyes, hit me in the chest. I stood up and walked over, fishing out enough for 2 fares. "Here," I said softly, handing the driver the bills. The woman turned to me, startled. "Oh no, sweetheart, I can't. It's fine," I said, smiling. "Just sit down. You said hospital, right? Which one?" She hesitated, then whispered, "Mercy General. My grandson had an accident. They say he'll be okay, but I need to be there." I nodded. "Then you definitely shouldn't be standing here arguing." For a moment, something like relief crossed her face, and she grasped my hand. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," I replied, moving back to my seat. She sat across from me, still holding her bag tightly. After a moment, she spoke again, her voice quiet but warm. "I'm Jeanette Miller, and you are—" "Natalie. Natalie Cooper." She smiled faintly. "Natalie, you've got a kind heart. The world doesn't see enough of that anymore." We rode in silence for a while after that, the only sounds the hum of the bus and the rain tapping against the windows. She got off 3 stops before mine, turning to wave at me. "I'll remember this, sweetheart," she said. I smiled back, thinking it was just something people said. At the time, I had no idea how much that moment would matter. By the time I arrived at the Grand Estate, the drizzle had turned into a full downpour. Their house loomed like a mansion straight out of a movie, columns, landscape gardens, even a fountain at the front. I paused at the gate, took a deep breath, and told myself to hold my head high. I could do this. Inside, I wiped raindrops from my dress, rehearsing polite greetings in my head. Smile, shake hands, compliment the home. Don't talk too much about work unless they ask. I thought the hardest part of the evening would be my nerves. I didn't realize it would be something far worse. Something that would make the bus ride, the rain, even the worry about my dress seem so small. The butler, I didn't even know people actually had butlers, opened the door and ushered me into a foyer so big it could have held my entire apartment twice over. Marble floors, a chandelier dripping with crystal, and a staircase that curved like something out of a historical drama. I smoothed the skirt of my dress and tried to swallow the lump in my throat. Tyler came down the stairs, smiling that easy smile I'd fallen for. "You made it," he said, kissing my cheek quickly. For a moment, I relaxed. Maybe I'd overthought this. Maybe his parents really would welcome me. He led me into the dining room, where his parents were already seated at a table long enough to host a small wedding. His father, tall and broad-shouldered, rose slightly to shake my hand. "Ms. Cooper," he said, polite but distant, like he was greeting a business associate he didn't plan to see again. His mother, in a flawless cream blouse and pearls that probably cost more than my car, gave me a once-over and a smile so tight it could have cut glass. "Natalie, is it? We've heard some things." Her voice trailed off like there was more she wanted to say, but decided not to yet. I smiled, pulling out a chair. "Thank you for inviting me. Your home is beautiful." His mother tilted her head slightly. "Yes, we do our best." She didn't ask me to sit. She just went back to adjusting her napkin. Dinner started with small talk, the weather, some local charity gala they were sponsoring, a new investment Tyler's father was making. I tried to add little comments here and there, but every time I did, there was a pause, a glance between them, the kind of glance that says she doesn't belong here. Then came the questions. "So, Natalie," his mother began, her fork clinking softly against her plate, "you're a seamstress?" "Yes," I said, forcing cheerfulness into my tone. "I design and alter dresses, mostly bridal and formal wear, but I'm hoping to expand into custom evening gowns." She murmured. "And where did you go to school for that?" "I went to a vocational college here in Des Moines," I replied. Her lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but wasn't. "Oh, not a 4-year university." I felt my face warm. "No, ma'am. I chose a faster program so I could start working and helping my mom sooner." "Helping your mother?" Tyler's father interjected, his tone curious but edged. "Is she unwell?" I hesitated, wondering how much to say. "She has a heart condition. I live with her, so I can help when she needs it." His mother's eyes flicked toward Tyler, then back to me. "How admirable," she said flatly. The rest of dinner continued in that same rhythm. Questions that weren't really questions, compliments that felt like tiny cuts. "Do you rent or own your apartment? How many clients do you have? Have you ever considered changing careers?" It wasn't what they said, it was how they said it. I could feel myself shrinking with each passing minute. And Tyler, he just sat there. He laughed at his father's jokes, nodded when his mother spoke, but he never once stepped in to say, "She's amazing and I love her." He didn't defend me, didn't ease the tension, didn't even look me in the eye when I tried to catch his gaze. By the time dessert was served, my appetite was gone. I placed my napkin on the table and forced a smile. "Thank you so much for dinner. I'm afraid I need to get going. Early morning at work tomorrow." His mother's expression didn't change. "Of course. It was enlightening to meet you." I stood, clutching my purse, waiting, hoping for Tyler to follow me, to at least ask if I was okay. But he stayed seated, murmuring something to his father as if I'd already left. So I walked out alone. The rain outside had turned heavier, but I didn't care. Each drop masked the tears spilling from my eyes. I wrapped my arms around myself and started walking, the sound of my heels slapping against the wet pavement drowning out the ache in my chest. Somewhere deep down, I knew that night wasn't just a bad dinner. It was the end of something I had believed in, and maybe, in its own painful way, the beginning of something else entirely. When I finally made it home that night, I stood in the hallway for a full minute, trying to force a smile onto my face before opening the door. My mom's health was fragile, and the last thing she needed was to see her daughter broken and dripping, wet like a character in some tragic movie. I took a deep breath, wiped my face with my sleeve, and stepped inside. "Nat, is that you?" Mom called from her bedroom. Her voice carried the same gentle warmth it always had, but there was a hint of fatigue underneath. "Yeah, Mom. Just got in." I kicked off my soaked heels and tried to sound cheerful. "It's pouring out there. I think I set a new record for walking in heels." She chuckled softly. "That's my girl. Did everything go well tonight?" I hesitated for just a fraction of a second before answering. "Yeah, it was fine. Just tired, that's all." I could hear the rustling of her blankets as she shifted in bed. "You work too hard, sweetheart. Don't forget to rest." "I won't, Mom," I said, heading straight to the shower before she could see my face and ask the questions I wasn't ready to answer. Under the hot water, I let myself cry again, quietly so she wouldn't hear. The sting of humiliation from Tyler's silence, the cold judgment in his mother's eyes, all of it spilled out and swirled down the drain. For the next few days, I threw myself into work, hoping that if I stayed busy enough, the ache would fade. But life, it seems, had more storms waiting. One morning, I found Mom sitting at the kitchen table, pale and holding her chest. "Mom, what's wrong?" I rushed to her side, and she tried to wave me off. "Just a little dizzy. It happens." But I could see the truth in her eyes. She was scared too. We went to her cardiologist that afternoon, and after several tests, we were referred to a specialist at Mercy General. He was kind but direct. "Your mother's condition has worsened significantly. The medication is no longer enough. She needs surgery, and soon." My heart dropped. "Surgery? How soon?" "Within the next month, ideally within weeks. Without it, her risk of heart failure increases drastically." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. "Okay, how much will it cost?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything before he even spoke. For someone uninsured at this level, we're looking at, well, somewhere in the range of $80,000 to $100,000. I felt the air leave my lungs. That was more than I made in 2 years, maybe 3. "Is there any assistance program?" "There are charity programs and grants," he said, "but most are targeted toward pediatric cases or certain demographics. I can give you a list of foundations to contact," but his voice softened. "Be prepared for it to take time." Time. That was the one thing we didn't have. That night, I sat at our tiny kitchen table long after Mom went to bed, staring at the crumpled list of phone numbers and websites the doctor had given me. I called every single one over the next few days, explaining our situation, begging for help. Some were polite but firm. We're not taking new adult cases at this time. Others didn't even return my calls. One woman sighed and said, "I'm sorry, sweetheart, but this just isn't the kind of story donors open their wallets for. If you had young kids at home or some tragic accident, people react differently." I wanted to scream. My mom's life was on the line, wasn't that enough? Finally, out of desperation, I did something I swore I wouldn't do. I called Tyler. He picked up on the second ring, sounding surprised. "Nat? Hey, I wasn't expecting to hear from you." "Tyler, I wouldn't be calling if it wasn't serious," I said quickly, my voice already shaking. "My mom needs surgery, heart surgery, and we don't have the money. I thought maybe," I swallowed. "I thought maybe you could lend me some. Just until I figure something out. I'll pay you back, every cent." There was silence on the line, then a quiet laugh. "Nat, come on, really? I knew something like this would happen eventually. My mom literally warned me about this exact thing. She said if we split, you'd probably find some excuse to." "Tyler, that's not what this is." I interrupted, tears burning my eyes. "I'm not asking for me. I'm asking for my mom's life." "Yeah, well, I'm sorry she's sick, but I'm not a bank. Don't call me again, okay?" And with that, he hung up. I stared at my phone, the words still echoing in my ears. Don't call me again. For the first time in years, I felt completely powerless. My world had narrowed to two impossible choices: watch my mom's health decline or find a miracle. And miracles, at least in my experience, didn't show up on cue. But sometimes, kindness has a way of circling back when you least expect it. 2 days after Tyler hung up on me, I sat on a bench outside Mercy General, my head buried in my hands. I had spent the morning at work, but couldn't focus, so I left early. Mom was inside getting pre-op testing, though we still didn't know how we would pay for the surgery. I stared at the cracked pavement, feeling like life had just pulled the rug out from under me. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "Sweetheart? Natalie, is that you?" I looked up, blinking through tears. Standing in front of me was the elderly woman from the bus, the one I had bought a ticket for days earlier. Her tan coat was the same, her eyes still soft but now brighter. "Mrs. Miller?" I said, surprised. She smiled and reached for my hands. "I told you I'd remember you. Are you all right, honey? You look like I did the day I lost my husband." I shook my head, embarrassed. It's just been a bad week. My mom's here. She needs heart surgery, but we don't have the money to pay for it. I don't know what to do." For a moment, she studied me, then slowly sat down beside me. "You're the girl who gave me bus fare when I had nothing in my pockets. You didn't even think about it, did you?" I shrugged. It wasn't a big deal. "It was to me," she said firmly. "That day, my grandson was hurt in an accident. If not for you, I would have missed seeing him awake for the first time." She looked over her shoulder and waved. "Benjamin, over here." A tall man in his late 20s walked toward us. He had kind eyes and carried himself with the calm confidence of someone who'd been through hard times and come out stronger. "Grandma, who's this?" he asked, smiling. "This is the young woman I told you about, the one who helped me that day," she said proudly as if I were family. "And she needs help now." I wanted to protest, to tell her she didn't owe me anything, but the words stuck in my throat. Ben sat down on my other side. "Tell me what's going on." Something about his tone, steady, no judgment, broke whatever wall I had left. I explained everything. Mom's worsening heart condition, the cost of the surgery, the dead-end calls to charities, even Tyler's refusal to help. My voice cracked more than once, but I kept talking until there was nothing left to say. Ben didn't hesitate. "How much do you need?" I blinked. "What, No, I'm not asking you for money. I know you're not, he said calmly. But I'm offering. My company's doing well, and honestly, it's the least I can do. You helped my grandma when you didn't have to. You gave her dignity that day, and I don't forget things like that. Tears spilled over my cheeks. Ben, it's too much. I can't, he shook his head. You can and you will, because this isn't charity, it's an investment in someone who clearly deserves it. Your mom deserves to live without worrying if her daughter is drowning in debt. Mrs. Miller placed her hand on mine. You helped me see my grandson. Now, let us help you keep your mother. For a long moment, I just sat there holding both their hands, overwhelmed by the sheer kindness of strangers who suddenly didn't feel like strangers anymore. Ben pulled out his phone. I'll call the hospital billing department and make arrangements. And Natalie, what do you dream of doing besides worrying about bills? I hesitated, then smiled shyly. I've always wanted to open my own bridal studio, designing custom dresses instead of just altering other people's work. He grinned. Perfect. Once your mom's healthy, we'll talk about that too. I know a few investors who love supporting local talent. I stared at him, stunned. Why would you do that for me? His expression softened. Because kindness deserves to be paid forward. And because you remind me of my grandma. Quiet strength, even when life's unfair. People like you, you're rare. For the first time in weeks, I felt hope, not the fragile, desperate kind, but something real, steady, like the first warm day after a long winter. As we walked back into the hospital together, I glanced at the gray sky outside and felt something shift inside me. Sometimes life breaks you, so you can see who's truly there to help pick up the pieces. The surgery was scheduled for the following week, and thanks to Ben's immediate intervention, the hospital cleared the financial hold in less than 48 hours. I couldn't believe it when the billing manager called me directly to confirm, your mother's surgery is fully funded. You don't need to worry about payment. I sat there in stunned silence before whispering, thank you, over and over until my voice gave out. On the morning of the procedure, Mom gripped my hand as they wheeled her into the operating room. Natalie, she said softly, don't let this scare you. Life has a way of turning pain into something beautiful. You just have to let it. I smiled, though tears blurred my vision. I'm not scared, Mom. Not anymore. The surgery lasted 6 hours. I paced the waiting room, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Ben and his grandmother stayed with me the entire time, bringing coffee, making quiet conversation, even distracting me with funny stories about Ben's childhood mishaps. It felt surreal how only a week earlier they were strangers, and now they were a lifeline. Finally, the surgeon walked out with a tired smile. It went perfectly. She's stable and resting. With proper recovery, she has an excellent prognosis. Relief crashed over me like a wave, leaving me shaky but lighter than I'd felt in months. I thanked him, thanked every nurse in sight, and then collapsed into a chair, crying, not from fear this time, but from sheer gratitude. The next few months passed in a blur of hospital visits, medication schedules, and slow recovery milestones. Mom grew stronger each week, her cheeks gaining color, her laugh coming easier. Only after 3 months did her doctors confirm she could return to her normal daily routine. She kept saying, I feel like I've been given a second life. True to his word, Ben didn't disappear after writing a check. He visited often, bringing flowers for Mom and coffee for me, asking about my dream studio like it wasn't just idle conversation. One afternoon, while Mom was napping, he sat at our tiny kitchen table, spreading out some documents. I wasn't kidding about investing in your future, Natalie, he said. I know you want your own bridal studio. I want to help you make it real. I stared at him, stunned. Ben, you've already done too much. He smiled. You call saving a life too much? This is nothing. I've seen your work. It's incredible. You don't just sew. You create moments people never forget. You deserve the chance to do it your way. It took some convincing, but eventually I said yes. Not because I wanted charity, but because I finally believed I was worth believing in. 9 months after my mom had fully recovered, Cooper Bridal finally opened its doors in a cozy downtown space. It had taken months of planning, licensing, renovations, and building my client list, but at last the dream was real. Mom stood beside me at the ribbon cutting, tears in her eyes, holding a bouquet Ben had given her. That day, as I looked at the small crowd cheering us on, friends, clients, even Ben's grandmother, I realized something profound. Family isn't just who you're born to. It's who shows up when everything falls apart. Ben became a constant presence, not just as a business partner, but as a friend, and maybe something more, though we never rushed it. There was comfort in the slow, steady way our connection grew, rooted in trust rather than infatuation. One afternoon, a young bride-to-be came into my shop, shy and quiet, saying she didn't feel beautiful in anything she tried on. I worked with her for weeks, creating something just for her. When she finally tried on the finished gown, she burst into tears. "I feel beautiful again," she whispered. Those words stayed with me long after she left because they echoed my own journey. I'd felt broken and small, unworthy of love or dreams. But through kindness, both given and received, I'd found myself again. Standing in my studio, surrounded by silk and lace, I thought about Tyler for the first time in months. Not with anger, not with regret, but with a kind of distant gratitude. If he hadn't failed me, I might never have walked the path that led to this life, these people, this healing. Sometimes heartbreak isn't the end. Sometimes it's the push you need to discover where you truly belong. And as I watched my mom laughing with Ben's grandmother in the corner, both of them healthy and full of life, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And it all started with one simple act of kindness on a rainy bus ride, one moment that proved the world can still surprise you in beautiful ways. The phone wouldn't stop buzzing. It skittered across the coffee table like it had a life of its own, vibrating in short, sharp bursts. Mom, then Dad, then Tyler, again, and again, and again. It was like watching the same terrible sitcom rerun over and over, except this wasn't funny. Not even close. I didn't reach for it, didn't answer, didn't flinch. I just sat back against the worn leather of my second-hand couch, arms crossed, eyes fixed on that little screen dancing across the wood like it might explode if I ignored it long enough. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that house for the last time. No shouting, no slammed doors, no dramatics. I'd simply picked up my duffel bag, stuffed in a few clothes and my laptop, and left. Calm as can be. Done. Completely done. At the time, I thought that would be the end of it. They told me not to come back, and I took them at their word. Simple, right? But here they were, months later, blowing up my phone like I'd ghosted them on Christmas, like I owed them my soul all over again, like I hadn't spent the last decade playing the role of their unpaid therapist, errand runner, and personal banker. I leaned back into the cushions, let out a slow breath, and smiled, just a little, just enough to feel it in my chest. That twist of dark satisfaction, because this chaos was proof that I'd finally done it. I'd finally shaken them. They didn't own me anymore. Not like they used to. And yet the buzzing continued. Persistent, desperate, a digital reminder of everything I had escaped, and everything I still hadn't truly left behind. If you're reading this or listening, I guess, you're probably wondering how I got here. How a 29-year-old finance analyst, the good daughter who never once caused a scene, ended up ghosting her own parents and turning off her phone like they were just another scam caller. Well, buckle up, because it's not the kind of story you can wrap up in a few neat lines. No, this one's messy, ugly, and exactly the kind of thing I wish someone had told me could happen when you love your family more than they'll ever love you back. My name is Jordan Evans. Born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, I was the straight-A student, the one who got herself into college with scholarships and midnight shifts. The girl who never drank in high school never skipped class, never gave my parents a single reason to worry. Meanwhile, my older brother Tyler, well, let's just say he lived a very different life, and they adore him for it. But we'll get to that. All of it. The favoritism, the gaslighting, the financial drain. The day they told me I was ungrateful and kicked me out of the house I was secretly paying for. And how that day set off the first real breath I had taken in years. Right now, what you need to know is this. I didn't leave because I was angry. I left because I was done. Because sometimes the only way to love yourself is to stop loving the people who keep bleeding you dry. And today, as I sat in my small one-bedroom apartment with my phone lighting up like a slot machine, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. The power to do absolutely nothing. I let the phone buzz. Let it scream in silence. Let it remind me how far I'd come. And I didn't move an inch. Because for once, they were the ones panicking. Not me. And God, that felt good. I wasn't born into chaos. It crept in slowly, like water leaking through the cracks in the foundation. At first, it just felt uneven, slightly off, like maybe I was imagining things, that maybe I was too sensitive, that maybe love really did come with conditions. You just had to meet them right, consistently, quietly. I was 8 when I first noticed it. Tyler broke a neighbor's window with a baseball bat, and Mom rushed to defend him before the glass even stopped falling. "He didn't mean to," she cried, hugging him like he was the one who'd been hurt. Dad paid for the damages without blinking. No grounding, no scolding, just a sad smile and a pat on the head. A week later, I accidentally knocked over a vase while cleaning, and the look Mom gave me could have sliced stone. "You're better than this, Jordan," she hissed. "Don't disappoint me again." That became the refrain of my childhood. You're better than this. Be the example. Tyler's struggling right now. He needs support. Tyler was always struggling. From age 10 to 33, that never changed. He flunked out of high school twice. Mom blamed the teachers. He quit college after a semester. Dad said the curriculum wasn't a good fit. He floated from job to job like a leaf on water, never staying anywhere long enough to be held accountable. And through all of it, he was coddled, protected, understood. I, on the other hand, was the rock. At 16, I got my first job at a fast food joint down the street. I'd come home smelling like grease and tired to the bone, but no one asked how my day went. They were too busy calming Tyler after his latest life crisis. When I got a full-ride scholarship to Ohio State, Dad grunted, "That's good," and went back to his paper. Mom didn't even look up from her soap opera. But when Tyler posted an out-of-focus photo of himself standing outside a community college 2 years later, they printed it and framed it like it was a diploma. I didn't get a celebration. I got expectations. You see, in our house, love wasn't given, it was earned. And even then, only sometimes. I learned how to stay quiet, how to be useful, how to make myself small when Tyler needed the spotlight, and how to expand just enough when Mom needed someone to complain to about how hard life was. I paid the bills on time, got straight A's, kept the fridge stocked when no one else would. I didn't ask for help because I knew it wouldn't come. But deep down, I kept hoping that maybe if I just held it all together long enough, they'd finally see me. Not as the backup plan, not as the safety net, but as their daughter, their equal. Spoiler, they never did. And Tyler? He didn't have to lift a finger. Not when I was always 2 steps ahead, catching what he dropped. Not when Mom insisted he just needed more time to find his path, and Dad mumbled about how the world's harder on boys nowadays. I was building a life brick by brick, and Tyler was drawing stick figures in the dirt, and somehow I was still the one being asked to slow down, to wait, to help, to give, and I did. For years, I told myself it was strength. That being needed meant I mattered. That love in our family looked like utility. But now, looking back, I realized that I wasn't loved. I was used. Every good grade, every late-night shift, every quiet sacrifice, it just made them expect more. Not appreciate more, just expect. So when you hear me say that walking away wasn't easy, believe me, it wasn't. I was trained from childhood to stay, to fix, to absorb. But even the strongest foundation can crack when the weight's not shared. And mine had been crumbling for years. It started with $20. Mom called one evening while I was finishing a report for my boss. Hey, sweetie, we're a little short on the electric bill. Can you help us out just this once? Her voice was soft, sweet, practiced. I didn't even hesitate. Of course, Mom. I transferred the money before she could finish thanking me. That was the first time. The second came a week later. Your dad forgot to do the groceries again, she sighed. Could you pick up a few things? Just the basics, nothing fancy. And like the idiot daughter desperate for approval, I showed up with 4 full bags, fresh produce, meat, even the almond milk she liked. Then came the gas bill, the broken faucet, that we're behind on the mortgage, but it's just temporary. And suddenly, just this once became, we'll pay you back soon, which evolved into, we'd do it for you. But they never did. I started keeping track, first in my head, then in a spreadsheet. I was covering almost everything. Electric, gas, groceries, even most of the mortgage. Meanwhile, Tyler sat on the living room couch, controller in hand, playing video games like he was auditioning for a speedrun championship. No job, no rent, no shame. And every time I asked, every time, Mom's voice would get that trembling edge. Tyler's trying his best, she'd whisper, like I was the villain for noticing reality. Dad would shrug, half asleep in his recliner, muttering, We're lucky to have you, kiddo. As if that was gratitude. I told myself it was fine, that I could handle it. After all, I was the one with the job, the apartment, the salary. Tyler was still figuring things out, apparently into his 30s. But the truth? I was bleeding, quietly, steadily. My weekends vanished into errands for them, grocery runs, bill payments, car maintenance. My paychecks disappeared into their accounts. And every month I told myself the same lie. They'll get back on their feet soon. But soon never came. Instead, I got eye rolls from Tyler when I brought up budgeting. I got guilt trips from Mom about how hard things have been since the recession. I got cold silences from Dad when I didn't send money fast enough. And I started to change. I got quieter, more resentful. I began dreading their phone calls, not because I didn't care, but because I already knew what they were going to say. I could hear the scripts in my head before they even opened their mouths. It wasn't communication anymore. It was a pattern of extraction. And yet, I kept going. I kept helping, even when I couldn't afford to. I dipped into my emergency fund, canceled a trip I'd been planning for months, stopped putting money toward my student loans. I was burning my future to keep their present afloat. And still, they looked at me like it was expected, like it was normal, like I owed them for giving birth to me. One day, I came over with groceries after a double shift and found Tyler lounging shirtless in the kitchen, eating ice cream from the tub. You didn't get the good cereal, he asked, not even bothering to thank me. That was the moment I felt something twist inside me. Not rage, not sadness, just something calcify, because I realized I wasn't the daughter anymore. I was the lifeline, the wallet, the fix. They didn't love me for who I was. They loved me for what I provided. And the more I gave, the less they saw me. It wasn't physical abuse. It wasn't loud or violent or dramatic. It was quieter than that, colder. A kind of parasitic love wrapped in "you're such a good daughter" and "we're just going through a tough time." But tough times don't last forever. And at some point I had to ask, why do they expect me to stay poor? Just so they can pretend they're not. It was a Sunday in early October. The air had that brutal chill that made your bones ache before the sun even finished rising. I had just wrapped up a 70-hour week at the firm. Spreadsheets, back-to-back meetings, late-night client calls. My eyes were fried. My back ached. My bank account was still smarting from the last $600 I'd wired Mom for emergency utilities. But still, I showed up. Groceries in both arms, keys between my teeth, trying not to drop the bag of apples or the oat milk Mom liked even though no one else drank it. The porch light was on, which was weird. It was broad daylight. But I didn't think much of it. I pushed the door open with my hip, stepped into the house I grew up in, the house I'd been secretly keeping from foreclosure for 2 years, and immediately knew something was wrong. They were waiting for me. Mom sat on the edge of the living room couch, arms crossed, jaw tight. That look she saved for teachers who gave Tyler detention. Dad stood just behind her, hands in his pockets, face blank. Tyler was sprawled on the other couch, one foot on the coffee table, tapping away at his phone like he hadn't seen me. No, hi, Jordan. No, thanks for the groceries. Just silence. Heavy. Condensed. Measured. I set the bags down slowly. What's going on? I asked. Mom didn't blink. We need to talk. My stomach dropped. Dad stepped forward, voice casual, almost rehearsed. We've been thinking. It's time you start contributing more. I stared at him. Contributing more? You make good money, Mom cut in. It's not fair that we're barely scraping by while you're off living in your own place, spending your paycheck however you want. Something in my chest snapped clean in half. I've been covering your mortgage, I said, voice low but shaking. For 2 years. That's not enough. Mom scoffed. A few bills here and there, that's hardly. My hands clenched at my sides. Groceries, utilities, rent, gas, insurance, all of it. Tyler doesn't pay a dime. He's 33 and hasn't had a job since 2019. But I'm the problem because I dared to move out and live like a functioning adult. Tyler rolled his eyes. Jesus, Jordan. It's just money. They've done a lot for us. I snapped my head toward him. Us? Tyler, what part of us do you belong to when I'm the only one footing the bill? That was it. Mom stood, her face hardening like stone. Don't talk to your brother like that. He's trying his best. I let out a laugh, so dry it burned. Really? Because from where I'm standing, his best looks like playing Fortnite in his underwear while I pay for your electricity. Dad's voice cut through, sharp and cold. Enough. We're asking you to step up. If you were a good daughter, you'd take responsibility. This house is too much for us to manage alone. And there it was. The line they'd drawn with their entitlement, their guilt-tripping, their refusal to see me as anything but a utility. I inhaled. Slow. Deliberate. Let me get this straight, I said. You want me to pay the mortgage in full, cover all the bills, and keep pretending like Tyler isn't sitting here doing absolutely nothing. Again. And you don't see anything wrong with that? Mom's mouth thinned. We just thought, as our daughter, you'd want to help your family. And what's Tyler? I snapped. A houseplant. Tyler bolted upright. I hate you. I didn't ask for this. No, I said, but you sure as hell benefited from it. Then Mom's voice exploded. If you walk out that door, don't bother coming back. And for a second, everything stopped. Time. Breathing. The world itself. I looked around the room, at the furniture I helped pay for, the lights I kept on, the people I gave everything to, and felt nothing. No sadness. No guilt. Just clarity. I picked up my bag, walked to the door, opened it. The air outside hit my face like a slap, cold and clean. I turned back just once. Okay, I said, and then I left. No yelling, no speech, no drama, just done. And as I stepped off the porch, I realized for the first time in my life, they needed me more than I ever needed them. The first night in my apartment, I sat on the floor and cried. Not because I was sad, not because I missed them. I cried because it was the first time in years that no one needed anything from me. No bills in my inbox from Mom. No missed calls from Dad. No text from Tyler saying, "Can you Venmo me real quick?" It was just me, a bare room, a mattress on the floor, a second-hand lamp, And peace. Real, complete, aching peace. I remember looking at the ceiling and thinking, is this what quiet sounds like? Because for so long, silence in my parents' house meant danger. Mom sulking, Dad waiting to scold, Tyler pouting because I didn't drop everything to help him. Every moment of peace there came with the tension of the next demand, the next sigh, the next favor. But now, the silence was mine. It wasn't weaponized. It wasn't bait. It wasn't a warning. It just was. I didn't answer their calls that week, or the next. At first, they came like clockwork, twice a day, sometimes 3. Mom left voicemails, each one dripping with guilt and performative sorrow. I know we had a disagreement, but this is childish, Jordan. Dad followed with his usual rational nonsense. Let's talk this out. You can't just cut off your family. And Tyler, of course, sent one text. Don't be a bitch. I blocked them all. It wasn't permanent, at least. That's what I told myself. I just needed space. Time. Oxygen. But 1 week turned into 2, then a month. And then the silence stopped feeling strange. It started to feel necessary. I started cooking again. Sleeping. Saving money. I bought a plant and didn't kill it. I remembered what it felt like to go an entire weekend without panicking about someone else's needs. I was still working long hours, still pushing myself at the firm, but when I got home, it was my home. And no one was waiting with a list of expectations taped to the fridge. There were moments of guilt, sure. Usually when I passed by a family in the park or saw someone FaceTiming their mom on the subway, I'd feel that little pull in my chest. Was I being cruel? Cold? Ungrateful, like Mom said? But then I'd remember. All those nights, they slept soundly while I stayed up crunching numbers to make sure their lights didn't go out. All those days I canceled plans, drained savings, ignored red flags just to keep them afloat. All those times I cried in the bathroom after wiring money I didn't have. And the guilt would melt into something else. Something harder, sharper, resolve. Because for all the love I poured into them, all I got back was obligation. They loved me the way a leech loves a vein, only as long as the blood keeps coming. So I stopped the bleeding, and in that stillness, something new started growing. Confidence, maybe, or just the slow, quiet realization that I had value outside of what I could give. I made friends. I went to the movies alone. I bought a new blazer without justifying the cost to anyone. I rediscovered what it felt like to wake up on a Sunday and not drive across town with grocery bags and a fake smile. For the first time in my adult life, I had nothing to prove, no performance to give, no roles to play, just Jordan, just me, and it was glorious. Until one morning, 6 months to the day, I woke up to a message from Dad. Why haven't you paid the mortgage this month? There it was, the punchline. After all this time, after they kicked me out, cut me off, cursed my name, they still assumed I'd be paying, as if my silence was just a phase, as if I was still on autopilot, quietly sending checks, being the good daughter behind the curtain. I stared at the message for a long moment, then smiled, not soft, not sad, the kind of smile that comes when you realize you're not the one drowning anymore, and you finally let go of the rope. I typed back, oh, I thought I wasn't welcome, and hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, crossed my arms, and waited for the storm. The reply didn't take long. First came Dad's text. Jordan, this is serious. The bank is threatening foreclosure. Please call me. Then Mom, what is wrong with you? We're late on the mortgage. The bank called us, Jordan. And finally, Tyler, ever the eloquent one. Dude, seriously? You're gonna let them lose the house just to prove a point? I didn't answer. I didn't even blink. I just watched the screen light up again and again, like a machine on the verge of short-circuiting. I let the chaos spin, let it stew. 6 months. 6 months of silence, and they thought I was still on the hook, still theirs. It was funny, not in a haha way, More like watching a magician realize the rabbit's gone from the hat and he has no more tricks. They were unraveling, and for once, I wasn't holding the thread. But curiosity got the better of me. I called the bank, put on my most professional voice, polite, concerned, vaguely apologetic. Hi, this is Jordan Evans. I used to handle my parents' mortgage payments, but I've recently stopped. I just wanted to check the account status. A pause. A hold. Some keyboard clicking in the background. Then the rep returned with a line that landed like a slap. Ma'am, the account has been delinquent for nearly 8 months. 8 months. I blinked, sat perfectly still, did the math. That meant even before I left, even when I was still wiring hundreds of dollars a month to them, they weren't paying the mortgage. They were pocketing the money. I swallowed hard, thanked the rep, and hung up. Then I laughed. Quiet, bitter, too sharp to be joy. They'd been letting the house drown the whole time, and used me as the bucket. All those late-night transfers, all those paychecks chipped away for their temporary struggles. And they never even used it for what they said. They just watched the hole widen and figured I'd keep patching it with duct tape and devotion. I called Tyler. He picked up on the first ring. Jordan, finally. We need you to fix this. Where did the money go? I asked flat. A pause. What? The mortgage. I was sending money for months, and the bank says the last full payment was 8 months ago. Where did it go? He stammered. I don't know. That's not my thing. Mom and Dad handled it. Oh, come on, I snapped. You live there. You didn't notice the letters piling up? The red stamps on envelopes? You didn't think it was weird I was sending thousands of dollars, and somehow the power was still flickering? Look, he said, suddenly defensive. They needed help, all right? Things got tight. It's not like you were struggling. You don't get to say that. I cut in. You don't get to act like my success is the reason I should bleed dry. He huffed. You're being cruel. No, I said with the coldest clarity I'd ever felt. I'm letting you face the consequences of your own stupidity. Big difference. I hung up. Then Mom called, and like a fool I answered. Her voice came through high-pitched and desperate. How dare you, Jordan? You know we need help. The bank is threatening to take the house. I stayed calm. And you thought lying to me for months was the best way to secure that help. It wasn't like that, she snapped. Tyler's been struggling. You don't understand, struggling. I laughed. He's been struggling for a decade. You know who else struggled? Me. Working night shifts, skipping vacations, paying your bills while you smiled and nodded like I was your personal ATM. Dad got on the line, his voice low, measured. Jordan, we just need help this month. Just this one time. We're behind, yes, but if you can sell the house, I said. Silence. Then Mom, shrill, we can't. This is our family home. Then it should have mattered enough to pay for it, I replied. Dad inhaled sharply. Please, sweetheart, be reasonable. We just need support, not judgment. I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. No, what you need is accountability. We're your parents, he said softly. You will help us. I smiled. Looks like you'll have to figure this one out without me. And I ended the call. The phone buzzed again, instantly. More texts, more voicemails, more desperation. But I didn't care. Tight-leet. They'd used me. They gambled my love and bet against my spine. And they lost. I didn't answer any more calls that night. I let them come. Mom's fury, Dad's pleading, Tyler's snide voicemails. The phone buzzed like it had a vendetta, thrashing on the table like a wounded animal. And I just sat there watching them scramble the way I used to. It felt good. Not triumphant exactly, but clean, like pulling out a thorn that had been buried too deep for too long. For the first time, I wasn't the one panicking. Wasn't the one trying to fix a mess I didn't make. I was done playing savior in a story that never cared if I bled. Eventually, I picked up the phone, not to talk but to type. To Mom, funny. You keep asking what kind of daughter I am, but I'm not the one who stopped paying the mortgage. I'm not the one who hid it for months. Maybe it's time you deal with your own mess." I sent it and let it sit. 5 minutes later, Dad called. I let it ring, then picked up on the third try. His voice was softer this time. Not desperate, exhausted. "Jordan, this isn't you. We raised you better than this." I laughed, short and bitter. "No, you raised me to be useful. You raised me to keep my head down and open my wallet. You raised me to believe that if I just gave enough, maybe one day you'd actually see me." He was quiet for a long beat. Then, finally, he cracked. "We're sorry, Jordan. We messed up. But please, we need your help. We won't make it without you." I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and let his words hang in the air. "You said that before," I replied. "Every time. You said you'd pay me back, that things would change, that it was just this once. But all I ever did was hold up the foundation while the rest of you took naps." "We didn't mean to take advantage, but you did," I snapped. "You took and took until there was nothing left of me but spreadsheets and late payments and empty weekends." He sounded small, broken. "I'm sorry." "Then show it," I said. "Fix it yourselves." There was another pause. Then he whispered, "Jordan, this is everything. The house, it's all we have." I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered all the times they let me carry the weight alone. All the times I asked for nothing, and still they made me feel like a burden when I couldn't give more. "No," I said. "It's all you have. Because you never built anything of your own. You just drained it from me. I'm begging you. And I'm saying no." I hung up. The phone exploded again, texts pouring in like a dam had burst. From Mom, "You don't understand. You'll regret this." From Tyler, "Nice job. You're destroying everything. Real classy, Jordan." From Dad, "Please. We'll pay you back. We swear. Just help us this once." But it was too late. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for another lifeline. Another extension of the lie. I typed one final reply, to all three of them, in a group message this time. "No more hiding. You had years to be honest. You had months to ask without lying. You chose this, not me. I'm not your bailout plan. I'm your daughter, and you treated me like a paycheck." And then I blocked them, not out of anger, out of necessity. I needed to close the loop. To put a period at the end of a sentence that had dragged on far too long. Because every time I picked up that phone, every time I listened to them spin their webs of guilt and panic, I forgot what I'd already learned. That peace doesn't beg for attention. And real love doesn't bankrupt you. I sat in the quiet that followed, heart pounding, hand shaking, but it wasn't fear this time. It was freedom. The silence after blocking them wasn't as satisfying as I'd imagined. It was heavy, thick, like the pause after a slammed door, the kind that echoes longer than it should. I stretched out on my couch, phone face down on the table, TV playing something I wasn't really watching. For the first time in years, no one could reach me. No one could drain me. But in the quiet, doubt crept in. Was I too harsh? Should I have offered a compromise? Found some middle ground before torching the bridge? I mean, they are my parents. Tyler's still my brother. And the house, the one they're about to lose, it holds my childhood too. Birthday balloons taped to the kitchen cabinets. My high school graduation picture in the hallway. The scar on the doorframe from when I tripped racing Tyler to the fridge. But that's the trick, isn't it? Memory disguises itself as meaning. You start to confuse sentiment with safety. You start to think, well, maybe it wasn't that bad. Except it was. It was exactly that bad. They lied to me. Repeatedly. They took my money for months, years, and never told me the truth. They chose to let the house slip into default while I was still paying for it, and then expected me to clean up the mess after they kicked me out. No explanation. No apology. Just a demand. And when I said no, suddenly I was ungrateful, cold, cruel. But tell me, what kind of love demands your financial ruin in return for affection? What kind of family threatens you with guilt when they've already weaponized every sacrifice you've ever made? I didn't abandon them. They abandoned me the second they stopped seeing me as a daughter and started seeing me as a backup plan. And maybe that's what hurts most. Not the lies, not the money, but the realization that to them I was never Jordan. I was a job title, a debit card, a safety net with a smile. I turned the TV off, let the quiet settle again. This time I didn't fight it, because the truth is I don't regret walking away. I regret not doing it sooner. I regret every time I ignored that tight feeling in my chest when Mom asked for just one more favor. Every time I skipped a vacation, canceled dinner with friends, avoided checking my balance because I knew they'd call again. I regret the years I spent thinking love meant sacrifice without limits. But I don't regret saying no. Not this time. Not anymore. Still, part of me wonders, will I look back years from now and feel guilt when I see that house boarded up? When I hear they had to move into a tiny rental, sell off furniture, downsize their lives, will Tyler finally be forced to grow up? Or will he just find another woman to drain? Will they ever understand what they lost? Or will I always be the villain in their version of this story? I don't know, and maybe I never will. But what I do know is this: I'm breathing easier, sleeping better, laughing more. My savings account isn't a war zone anymore. My weekends belong to me again. I'm discovering what it means to exist without constantly performing usefulness. And that feeling is worth every missed call, every angry text, every "how dare you?" Because I dared. I dared to say no. I dared to walk away. I dared to live like my value wasn't tethered to what I could give away. So here I am, alone, free, and wondering, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Did I let my anger cloud a chance to repair what was broken? Or did I finally do the only thing I could to survive? Let me know, because this story, it's mine, but I think it might be yours too.